When women desire same-sex sex or experimentation, oftentimes they will go to parties where their same-sex actions can be facilitated by alcohol and men. Parties give women opportunities to engage in same-sex behavior that would be deemed inappropriate elsewhere. Queer women are constrained by men in these situations because women's same-sex actions are for men's pleasure rather than their own. Without the excuse of alcohol, encouragement by men, or a man's first move to engage in a threesome, many women wouldn't experiment with their sexualities. These constraints are due to historical societal standards that have defined gender and sexuality, sex negativity, sex education, and the sexual double standard.
To discuss these constraints, first we need to talk about how queer women emerged. Capitalism made it possible to marry or have partnerships that weren't based on purely survival and economic benefit. This allowed women to support themselves independently without men. Female homosexuality was ultimately ignored until the 1900s, and when it was addressed, it focused on masculine women. The institution of medicine was very influential in determining society's conceptions of homosexuality. Heterosexuality became the master sexuality in which all other sexualities deviated, therefore making homosexuality unnatural. Medicine also created the belief that there are only two biological sexes that determine gender and sexuality. When someone presents as a feminine or a masculine, people assume their sexual identity is heterosexual. In this binary gender system, masculinity holds more power over femininity. This system also makes it so lesbian desire is understood in terms of masculine heterosexual desires. Lesbians are viewed as masculine women. Because feminine-presenting women are considered heterosexual by default in our society, it is hard for feminine women to try same-sex sex without the party scene to facilitate their actions. These ideas of binary gender and sexuality are heightened by societal norms and sex education. Our society has historically been sex negative, and sex is considered dangerous and sinful. Anti-obscenity laws created an environment that bottles up sexuality and only allows for what is considered good sex to circulate through society. This perpetuates heterosexual norms because heterosexual sex is considered good, appropriate sex, while homosexual sex is considered obscene. This contributes to women's need for an excuse to engage in same-sex actions. Homosexual sex is considered obscene, so women feel they need to mask their same-sex desires by catering to men's heterosexual desires or by being under the influence of alcohol. By masking their desires as heterosexual, women who engage in same-sex activities will be viewed as having good sex rather than obscene sex.
Children are also taught heterosexual behaviors in school. Through gendered sexual socialization, male and female children learn different rules, beliefs, and social norms regarding sexual behaviors and identities based on their biological sex. In some cases, preschool and kindergarten teachers promote heterosexual behavior by saying students are boyfriend and girlfriend and encouraging a male child to kiss a female one. In this example, the female's consent is being ignored to promote male heterosexuality. This promotion of heterosexual behavior to young children not only creates an environment that isn't welcoming to homosexual behavior, but also creates an atmosphere that early on tolerates a power difference between men and women. When male students kiss a female student without their consent, it is viewed as a natural desire for the boy, and the girl is labeled as passive and helpless. This leads to the belief that women are naturally rapeable because they are seen as endangered, vulnerable, and fearful, while men are viewed as being aggressive, strong, and powerful.
Later on in adolescence, when children attend a sex education class, teachers are also perpetuating heterosexuality and gender polarization. Sex education is taught differently to male and female students. Girls are told they have to be good girls who should know better than to ruin their reputation, while male students are never warned of their respect being lost if they have sex. This polarization declares females as the sexual gatekeepers, while males' sexual behavior is deemed unmanageable. In sex education courses, heterosexuality is also assumed, and there is no acknowledge of same-sex desires. When same-sex desires are acknowledged, they are talked about through wounded truths. Students are told about how gay people are more prone to suicide, drug addiction, and assault instead of talking about positive outcomes of queer relationships. These ideas of sex differences that have been taught to children throughout their education transfer over into adulthood. The sexual double standard is the idea that it is only acceptable for women to have sex when they are in a relationship, while it is acceptable for men to have sex whenever they want. The sexual double standard classifies women's desires as heterosexual romantic relationships and men's desires as purely sexual. This idea of desire gives men power over women because women are viewed as tolerant to hookups in order to get in relationships they want, but only if the man makes the first move. When looking at college students' perceptions of men and women's hookups, they viewed women's hookups as spontaneous, impulsive, and situational, while men's desires were perceived as natural, permanent, and basic character. Society tells young girls that they are sexual gatekeepers whose respect will be lost if they have sex. Society also tells those girls they are passive and helpless and that gayness is wounded. The sexual double standard declares that women can only have sex when in a relationship and that women should not make the first move. Because this is how we label women, who have same-sex desires are not likely to make the first move. Women are taught to be passive and gatekeep, and in consequence, many do not possess the confidence or knowledge to engage in these forward interactions. This is why women use men as facilitators to experiment, because men were taught these behaviors.
Solutions for promoting queer women's experimentation without men to facilitate should revolve around education reform. Starting in preschool, students should feel comfortable expressing different desires. Teachers should take courses to show them how to interact with children in a way that is not heteronormative. Instead of teachers promoting heteronormative behavior, they should promote gender and sexuality expression with all of their students. If 2 girls or 2 boys say they're going to get married, teachers shouldn't discourage them. If a student wants to play with a gendered object that doesn't fit the heteronormative script, they should be allowed and encouraged to do so. Normalizing homosexual behavior should carry on into adolescence sex education courses. Instead of telling girls they shouldn't have sex or they should give them the tools to have safe sex, girls should be encouraged to pick safe partners and use contraceptives instead of being told their reputation will be ruined if they engage in these activities.
By telling girls in their adolescence that gender and sexuality experimentation is normal and giving them knowledge to have safe sex without being shamed, queer women in hookup scene would be less likely to use men to facilitate their same-sex desires. Queer women will no longer need to use alcohol and men as an excuse for their actions because they won't have as much shame about their sexualities and desires.